And these are good questions. So the first question was
The hope.
the hope. Who was the hope for?
Yeah, who's the hope for?
Yeah,
And
well,
I've
I
not
think,
even touched on domestic American policy.
right. Are you talking for? So my interpretation of who's the hope for coming from Obama's point of view, is that the question?
Well, yeah, when
Well,
Obama and his administration are going to be potentially re-elected, and they talk about the rest of the world.
Yeah. Well, I'll begin by saying this. You know, Obama at one point, Cornel West as Piggy has beat up on this. At one point, Obama said that, describing America as this magical place. You know, he said in his autobiography, he said in his speech, it's a magical place where only somebody like him can happen, right, et cetera, et cetera. I think that statement tells you a lot about Barack Obama, because he actually believes something that in many ways is a myth. America's not a magical place. There's nothing particularly unique and divine about America in comparison to some other country. But Barack Obama believes that. I think he actually believes it. I think the hope that he's calling for is a hope for everybody, but within a context and with a view of America that isn't that dissimilar from his predecessors at its core. The question is, did folks know this when they voted for him or not? Some did, some didn't. The question too is, did we vote for a presidential candidate who happened to be black, or a black man who was vying for the presidency? Only individuals can answer that question. I can tell you what I voted for, but I know others that voted differently. So, particularly and I'm not a foreign policy expert. Dino could probably do a better job of answering those questions than I can. But certainly, I have deep-seated problems with what he's done in terms of foreign policy. But I have with the previous, every president that I've ever voted for. Let's put it that way. And that's because I have a different view of what democracy is, and because America's not a democracy. It just isn't. And I know I direct the Center for the Study of Race and Democracy, but that's because I have a particular vision of what a democracy is. We don't. So we actually have to start on that premise. But Barack Obama said, I think he actually believes that we do have one, but within the system within the context that he's developed. So the fact that he's taken those steps and approved those actions doesn't really surprise me, because he believes in American power. He really does. He's not completely averse to some of the imperialistic tendencies of America. I don't think that he views them as being imperialistic. I think he views them as being part of this God-given right to expand, American forms of democracy around the globe. So we're giving the gift of democracy, American-style democracy, to the world. Sort of like, the Western world we're given the gift of Christianity to black folks who are running around in the jungle, not knowing any better, right? Worshiping the animists and the sun and the moon and all these other things. And nobody asked us what we wanted. They just sort of forced it upon us. I think he actually believes it. And that's why I've always encouraged people to really challenge him on these issues. You're the first African American, first African descent, to be the head of the United States. Yet, you're preaching and you're condescending to black folks in Africa. You're launching, I don't even call them wars, I call them military actions, because they haven't been approved by Congress. You're sending drones through sovereign nations, you're attacking people, you're doing these things that really fly in the face of not only the spirit of our documents of freedom, but some of your own rhetoric. But I really don't think that he sees that big of a contradiction. And that's what we really have to ask ourselves. So even if he wins the election again, the question is, a lot of African Americans are obsessed with, well, how does he feel about racism in the United States? What is he doing for black folks here? And they're paying a whole lot of attention, or at least as much attention as they should, to what's happening the Obama administration is doing around the world. I thought his Cairo speech was much better than the speech that he gave in Ghana and some of the speeches that he gave in other parts of the globe. But there's a lot of problematic stuff, and it's sobering. Like you, I was disappointed, but quite frankly, I kind of expected some of it. It's bad. I wasn't voting for two lesser of two evils. I would never classify it as that, because I thought there was a lot to be there, and I thought that he would do some substantive things. But even at Grant Park, when he accepted the victory, right? At Grant Park, 250,000 people showed up in Grant Park. America has never had 250,000 people show up to celebrate. To protest, oh yeah. Not to celebrate something, of all different walks of life. And I was thinking to myself, because my mom called me up and she's the one who started me crying. But even after I stopped crying, I said, ooh, this is going to be rough a few months down now, because I wonder if these folks really realize who they elected. Not that was a bad thing, but I think there was the euphoria and the expectation. I think a lot of people thought they elected someone different. And to me, and I've said this, I said, what other than his skin color and lineage makes him different than Clinton or some of his predecessors? What makes him different? And I hesitate to say that in some audiences because I don't want that to be interpreted that I'm challenging his blackness. But in what ways is he different? And what sacrifices and accommodations do black people have to make to acquire power within the American system to acquire power? Do we have to do things like that? Do we have to, quote unquote, defend the United States by these type of actions and supporting these type of covert thing? I remember turning on the TV when I saw, what happened in Libya in the very beginning, and bodies being carried out, and what have you, and then the spin happened immediately, right? And I thought, it hurt me that happened, and I'll be honest, that happened on the watch of the first black president of the United States. I thought, is this what Hope and Change is about? Is this what we've been struggling for this long? Is this Pan-Africanism? Is this building bridges? It troubled me. It was a very American thing to do, right? But it's not a very African-American thing. I don't think most African-Americans would have supported something like that. But we're in a situation where most of us just sort of had to, swallow and think, well.
But Matt, he used his Nobel Peace Prize acceptance speech to talk about the virtue of war. I mean, that's a major
he did,
act of chutzpah
for
anyone, whatever color they are.
Yeah, he did. He did. And I told folks, I remember a lot of folks on the right, this is what race does. It's a meta language of race. It silences all discourses. People on the right were saying, oh, he's so leftist, he's going to come in, he's going to make United States weaker. And I'm like, no. He's going to be bombing people and sending drones just like anybody. I mean, it was just nonsense that they thought that his foreign policy and his willingness to engage and to fight would be any lesser. And I think they know that they knew that quite frankly too. I think they were just kind of playing the race card. But it was like, come on.
But he's also got a deep consciousness about the electability of the Democrats when they have this history of being weak. I mean, the perception of being weak on national security. And I think that's something that pretty much like what Blair did with Iraq. Blair developed a much more toughened military policy and foreign policy. Yeah. I think in order to expunge these perceptions from the system, that you've actually got to effectively become more of what the electorate want rather than lead. Now, I don't know whether or not that's going to continue into a second term. And I think that's the interesting point about your theme is this Barack Obama over 2 terms, or is it over 1 term with the hope of getting elected, that he can actually become somebody who is more real to who we think he is?
I think what you see is somebody who's sacrificing some of what he may want to do, but certainly what many of us would want him to do at the altar of political expediency and political reality. And that's a sobering and sad notion, but I think it's true. So I'm with you.